Clara's days moved with a quiet rhythm, a soft hum of duty and expectation. Her small house, tucked away on a street where the trees always seemed a little too tall and the shadows a little too long, was a world away from the grand estates her mother, Maria, cleaned. Every afternoon, the clatter of Maria's keys at the front door brought with it a familiar weariness that settled over their modest living room. Maria would drop her worn handbag onto the small table, her shoulders slumped, her eyes holding the distant gleam of polished marble floors and crystal chandeliers. She'd talk about the Caldwells, not with bitterness, but with a simple recounting of the day's tasks, the sheer scale of their wealth, and the endless demands of their opulent lives. For Clara, these stories were like postcards from another planet, sparking a quiet, almost secret, longing for something more than their predictable routine. Sometimes, when Maria was asleep, exhausted from another day of scrubbing other people's luxury, Clara would pull out a dusty shoebox from under her bed. Inside, nestled among faded tissue paper, were her old ballet shoes. Pink satin, now a little gray at the tips, with ribbons that once tied around her ankles like delicate restraints. Next to them lay a small, tarnished trophy, its tiny ballerina figure frozen in an eternal pirouette. These were relics from a different life, a life where Clara wasn't just Clara, the maid's daughter, but Clara, the prodigy. She remembered the thrill of the stage lights, the dizzying spin of a fouette, the perfect landing of a grand jeté. Her teachers had called her a natural, a gift. They said she had a grace that couldn't be taught, a technique that was beyond her years. Dreams of professional careers, of dancing on grand stages in distant cities, had filled her head like a beautiful swelling piece of music. But then, the music stopped. It wasn't a gradual fade, but an abrupt, jarring silence. A family crisis, a sudden heavy weight that landed squarely on their small household, had forced her to abandon it all. The details were murky now, a blur of hushed conversations and worried glances between her parents. All she knew was that one day she was dancing, and the next, she wasn't. The shoes went into the box, the trophy into the drawer, and the dreams were packed away with them, deep in a place she tried not to visit too often. Looking at them now, a mix of wistfulness and pain tightened in her chest. The passion was still there, a low, constant thrum beneath the surface, but it was suppressed, pushed down by the realities of their lives. Maria carried her own burden, a quiet guilt that Clara often sensed but never fully understood. Her mother worked tirelessly, her hands rough from cleaning, her spirit strong but tired. Clara knew Maria often blamed herself for the choices that led to Clara giving up ballet. Maria would sometimes catch Clara looking at her old dance things, and a shadow would cross her face, a silent apology for the dreams that had been sacrificed for their survival. The Caldwell estate was a world unto itself. Clara had only seen it from the outside, a blur of manicured lawns and towering gates from the passenger seat of her mother's old car. It was a place of immense wealth, a fortress of privilege that stood in stark contrast to their own humble existence. The mansion was a symbol of everything they weren't, a constant reminder of the vast social divide that separated their two worlds. One evening, Maria came home with a different kind of weariness. "Mrs. Caldwell needs extra help," she announced, her voice a little strained. "For a charity gala, she asked if you could come." Clara felt a familiar resistance, a pull to stay in her own quiet world. But she knew it wasn't really a question. It was a duty, another obligation to help her mother, to help them get by. "Okay, Mama," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, to hide the flicker of something else. Despite her reluctance, a tiny spark had been ignited, a flicker of curiosity about this other world, the one her mother described in fragments. What was it really like? Beyond the polished surfaces and hushed tones, what did people do in a place like that? It was a world so different from her own, a world she was about to step into, even if just for a few days. The next morning, Clara dressed in her cleanest, simplest clothes, a sense of quiet apprehension settling over her. She double-checked her bag, making sure she had everything she might need. As she walked out the door, the morning air felt crisp, carrying with it the scent of freshly cut grass and something else, something new and unknown. She took a deep breath, pushing down the familiar ache of old memories and stepping towards the Caldwell estate, towards a world that was about to collide with her own. The Caldwell estate loomed larger than Clara had imagined, a sprawling monument to wealth tucked behind tall hedges and an imposing wrought-iron gate. Her mother had driven her up the winding driveway, the gravel crunching under the tires, a sound that felt oddly loud in the quiet morning. The house itself was a grand, almost intimidating structure, of stone and dark wood, with countless windows reflecting the morning sun. Inside, it was even more overwhelming. High ceilings, polished marble floors that echoed with every step, and rooms filled with furniture that looked more like museum pieces than things to be used. Clara felt tiny and out of place, her simple clothes a stark contrast to the opulent surroundings. Every surface gleamed, every corner seemed to hold some expensive artwork or antique. It was a world entirely separate from her own, a place where luxury was simply the norm. She watched, almost like an observer in a movie, as members of the Caldwell family moved through their day. Mrs. Caldwell, elegant even in her casual wear, gave instructions to staff with a detached politeness. Mr. Caldwell was a fleeting presence, disappearing into his study with a briefcase and a stern expression. Their clothes were designer. Their conversations revolved around social events and investments, and there was an air of effortless entitlement about them all. They seemed to exist in their own bubble, untouched by the kind of daily struggles Clara and her mother faced. Their lavish lifestyle was on full display, a constant reminder of the chasm between their lives. Then there was Eleanor. Clara first saw her lounging by the pool, scrolling through her phone, a picture of teenage indifference. Eleanor Caldwell was the daughter of the house, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. Her hair was perfectly styled, her clothes trendy and expensive. She had a way of looking at people, especially staff, that made Clara feel invisible, or worse, like an inconvenience. Eleanor was used to getting her way, and it showed in her posture, her tone, and the casual way she commanded attention. Clara also observed Eleanor with her friends. They were a group of equally privileged teenagers, their voices light and carefree, as they discussed parties, designer brands, and the latest gossip. They seemed completely oblivious to the world outside their gilded cage, their concerns superficial, their laughter echoing a sense of unearned ease. Clara listened from a distance, understanding that her presence, and the presence of any other staff member, was simply part of the background noise in their lives. Something to be ignored. Clara was assigned various tasks related to the upcoming charity gala. Her primary role was to assist with decorations and organizing, which meant she spent hours moving through the mansion, setting up tables, arranging flowers, and polishing countless silver platters. This gave her an inside look at the sheer scale of the event. Every detail was meticulously planned, every item chosen for its expense and aesthetic appeal. It was an elaborate production, designed to impress and to raise money. Though Clara suspected the impressing part was almost as important as the fundraising. As she worked, she saw her mother, Maria, and the other household staff. They moved with quiet efficiency, their faces etched with a familiar weariness. They prepared food, cleaned, served, and anticipated needs, often working long hours without a break. Clara noticed how often their efforts went unnoticed, unappreciated by the Caldwells who took their tireless labor for granted. It was a silent ballet of service, a stark contrast to the pampered lives of those they served. Clara felt a pang of protectiveness for her mother, seeing the toll the work took on her. While carefully placing a centerpiece in what looked like Eleanor's private sitting room, Clara's gaze fell on a shelf. Among the various trinkets and photographs, she saw them. A pair of pink ballet slippers, worn but still delicate, and a small, gold-colored trophy. Her breath hitched. It was a fleeting glimpse, but it was enough to trigger a faint, almost painful memory of her own past, her own slippers, her own trophies. For a moment, the room seemed to fade, replaced by the image of a younger Clara leaping across a stage. Just then, Eleanor walked in, chatting loudly on her phone. Clara quickly averted her eyes, pretending to be absorbed in her task. Eleanor, oblivious to Clara's presence, began boasting to her friend about her dance lessons. "Oh yeah, I've been practicing a ton," Eleanor said, her voice dripping with casual confidence. "My instructor says I'm really good. I'm doing a piece at the gala, to kick things off. It's going to be the highlight of the evening. Everyone's so excited." Clara listened, a strange mix of emotions stirring within her. A flicker of envy, sharp and unexpected, pricked at Clara. It wasn't just envy for Eleanor's seemingly easy success, but a deeper, more profound sense of loss. Eleanor spoke of dance with such casualness, as if it were just another hobby, another thing to brag about. For Clara, dance had been everything, a part of her soul, abruptly taken away. Hearing Eleanor talk about it so flippantly, like a toy she could pick up and put down, stirred a pain she thought she had buried deep. Later that afternoon, as Clara was tidying up some scattered papers, Eleanor finally acknowledged her. It was a brief, dismissive glance. "Hey," Eleanor said, not even looking up from her phone. "Can you get me a water, and make it cold?" There was no please, no thank you, just a command. Clara simply nodded, her expression neutral, and went to fetch the water. To Eleanor, Clara was just another part of the household staff, a nameless, faceless helper, without any real recognition or individuality. Clara felt the familiar sting of being unseen, but beneath it, a quiet resolve began to form. This world, with its casual indifference and overt privilege, was starting to feel less overwhelming and more like a challenge. The night of the Caldwell Charity Gala burst into life. The mansion, usually grand, now shimmered under thousands of tiny lights, draped with expensive fabrics, and filled with the murmur of high society voices. It was a spectacle of wealth, a kaleidoscope of designer gowns and tailored suits, sparkling jewelry, and forced laughter. Clara, dressed in a simple black uniform, moved through the crowd like a ghost, her presence barely registered by the guests. Her job was to ensure everything flowed smoothly, to anticipate needs before they were voiced, to serve and to tidy, to remain largely invisible amidst the dazzling festivities. She carried trays of champagne, cleared empty glasses, and straightened misplaced decorations, her movements practiced and efficient. She saw her mother, Maria, moving with the same quiet dedication, her face tired but focused. They exchanged quick, knowing glances, a silent acknowledgement of their shared role in this elaborate charade. The air hummed with nervous energy and the clinking of silverware, the scent of expensive perfumes mixing with the aroma of gourmet food. Clara felt a strange detachment, observing the scene as if through a pane of glass. It was a world she was in, but not of. Then the murmurs intensified, turning into a collective hush as Eleanor made her grand entrance. She descended the sweeping staircase, bathed in the soft glow of the chandeliers, a vision in an elaborate, shimmering gown that seemed to catch every available light. Her hair was perfectly styled, her smile radiant, and she basked in the admiring glances and hushed whispers that followed her every step. She moved with an air of practiced confidence, like a queen surveying her court, clearly accustomed to being the center of attention. Clara watched from the periphery, a small knot forming in her stomach. A few minutes later, Mrs. Caldwell, Eleanor's mother, stepped onto a small raised platform near the main ballroom. She tapped a microphone, her voice clear and resonant. "Good evening, esteemed guests," she began, her smile wide and gracious. "Thank you all for joining us tonight for this wonderful cause. As you know, this gala is dedicated to supporting the arts, and in that spirit, we have a very special performance for you tonight." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room before settling proudly on her daughter. "It gives me immense pleasure to introduce my incredibly talented daughter, Eleanor, who will be performing a beautiful ballet piece for us. She has worked tirelessly, and I assure you, it will be a highlight of our evening." Polite applause rippled through the room, punctuated by a few enthusiastic cheers from Eleanor's friends. Eleanor, her face glowing with anticipation, took the makeshift stage. The music began, a classical piece that Clara recognized instantly from her own ballet days. Eleanor moved through the steps, her technique adequate, her lines mostly clean. She had clearly put in the hours, and her movements were precise. But as Clara watched, a familiar ache settled in her chest. Eleanor's performance, while technically sound, lacked something essential. It lacked passion, true artistry, the raw, emotional connection that transformed mere steps into a story. It was a practiced routine, not a dance born from the soul. It was a stark contrast to the vivid, almost painful memories of Clara's own past brilliance, the way she used to lose herself in the music, letting it guide her every muscle, every breath. Midway through Eleanor's piece, disaster, albeit a minor one, struck. As Eleanor attempted a particularly tricky turn, a prop, a small decorative stool meant to be part of the set, wobbled precariously and then toppled with a soft thud. The music also seemed to skip for a fraction of a second, just enough to throw off the rhythm. It wasn't a catastrophic failure, but it broke the illusion, causing a brief, awkward silence in the audience and a visible flinch from Eleanor. Eleanor, flustered by the glitch, and perhaps by the less enthusiastic reception than she had clearly expected, stumbled slightly. Her perfect smile faltered, replaced by a scowl. She looked around, her eyes darting, searching for something, someone to blame. Her gaze landed on Clara, who was standing quietly near the edge of the room, holding a tray of empty champagne flutes. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "You!" she snapped, her voice cutting through the polite murmurs of the crowd. She pointed a finger directly at Clara. "You were supposed to check the props. You probably knocked it over, you clumsy oaf. This is all your fault." The accusation hung in the air, sudden and sharp, drawing the attention of dozens of curious eyes to Clara. Clara froze, her heart pounding. She had been nowhere near the stage or the props. She had been serving drinks across the room. Eleanor, emboldened by the attention and her own unshakable sense of privilege, took a step closer, a cruel smirk twisting her lips. Her voice, though slightly lowered, carried clearly in the suddenly quiet room. "Honestly?" she scoffed, gesturing dismissively at Clara's simple uniform. "Some people just don't belong here. You don't even know how to dance." The words were meant to sting, to humiliate, to put Clara firmly back in her place. They were delivered with a casual cruelty that made several guests wince, though most simply looked away, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. Clara stood frozen, the tray of glasses suddenly feeling impossibly heavy in her hands. The insult hit her with the force of a physical blow. Her mind reeled. Initially, she was stunned, unable to process the sheer audacity of the accusation and the venom in Eleanor's voice. Then, a deep, familiar pain, one she thought she had buried long ago, resurfaced with agonizing clarity. It was the pain of her lost dreams, of the talent she had been forced to abandon, of the years of dedication and sacrifice that Eleanor so carelessly dismissed. A burning indignation flared within her. "You don't even know how to dance!" The words echoed in her ears, mocking her, cutting deeper than Eleanor could ever comprehend. They touched upon Clara's most cherished and lost dream, a dream that had once defined her. The sting of Eleanor's insult was not just about the present public humiliation, but about the profound injustice of her past, the silent grief she carried for what could have been. For a moment, the elegant ballroom disappeared, replaced by the ghost of a stage, a pair of worn point shoes, and the sound of applause that was no longer hers. A silent, fierce resolve began to harden within her. The guests murmured, a low hum of discomfort and judgment, filling the space where Eleanor's performance had just been. Some people looked at Clara with a fleeting glance of pity, quickly averted. Others, especially those in Eleanor's immediate circle, simply looked on with indifference, already moving past the minor drama. Clara felt a profound sense of humiliation, a hot flush spreading across her face and neck. But beneath that familiar sting, a surge of something new began to bubble up inside her. It was a feeling she hadn't recognized in years, a quiet, insistent defiance. It felt like a small, cold spark in the pit of her stomach, growing steadily warmer. Across the room, Maria, Clara's mother, had witnessed the entire exchange. Her face was etched with worry, her eyes fixed on Clara, a silent apology for their circumstances, for the life that had brought Clara to this moment of public shame. Maria's own hands, usually busy, were clasped tightly together, a gesture of helplessness. She wished she could step in, say something, anything. But she knew her place in this grand house. Her gaze met Clara's for a brief second, a shared understanding passing between them, a silent acknowledgement of the unfairness of it all. Eleanor's cutting words, "You don't even know how to dance," had struck a nerve so deep, it felt like an old wound tearing open. But instead of bleeding out, something within Clara began to knit itself back together, stronger than before. The insult triggered vivid flashbacks, not of pain, but of power. She saw herself in the studio, a younger Clara, sweat beading on her forehead as she pushed through another set of fouettes. She remembered the stern but kind face of her first ballet teacher, Madame Dubois, who had taught her that every movement, every breath was a story. She felt the weight of her point shoes, the smooth, cool feel of the bar under her hands, the joy she had felt, the absolute freedom of movement, the way the music had flowed through her veins like a second heartbeat. It all came rushing back. The memory of those rigorous training sessions, the blisters, The aching muscles, the endless hours of repetition, now felt like a badge of honor, not a burden. It was a secret world Eleanor knew nothing about, a world Clara had mastered. A silent challenge was ignited within Clara. Eleanor's words, meant to diminish her, to reduce her to nothing more than a clumsy maid, had instead awakened a dormant fire. It was a fire that had been banked for years, smoldering under the ashes of responsibility and resignation. But now it flared, hot and bright. A vague idea, still formless and raw, began to take shape in Clara's mind. She realized that Eleanor's words were not just an insult. They were an opportunity to reclaim a part of herself that she had long believed was lost forever. An opportunity to show not just Eleanor, but herself, who she truly was. She knew she couldn't just stand there and let Eleanor's venom define her. She had to do something. Needing a moment to herself, Clara retreated to a quiet corner of the mansion, a small, dimly lit alcove off one of the less trafficked hallways. She set the tray of glasses down on a nearby table, her hands trembling slightly. She took a deep, shaky breath, trying to process the jumble of emotions swirling inside her: hurt, anger, shame, and this new, unexpected spark of determination. She leaned against the cool wall, closing her eyes for a moment. From her secluded spot, Clara could still see snippets of the party. She watched as Eleanor, completely oblivious to the profound impact of her words, continued to revel in the attention, laughing loudly with her friends, her earlier frustrations seemingly forgotten. Eleanor was basking in the glow of her own perceived success, completely unaware that her casual cruelty had just set something momentous in motion. Clara observed her, a strange calm settling over her. Eleanor was a child, playing at something she didn't truly understand. Clara made a decision then and there. It wasn't about revenge, not entirely. It was about validation, about self-respect. She would not let Eleanor's words, or anyone else's, define her, or erase her past. She would not let that talent, that part of her soul, remain buried. She didn't know how, or when, or where, but she would dance again. The thought settled in her heart, firm and resolute. Later that night, long after the last guest had departed and the mansion had fallen silent, Clara found herself drawn to a secluded spot in the vast, empty ballroom. The moonlight streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Cautiously, quietly, she slipped off her worn service shoes. Standing in her bare feet, she stretched, her muscles protesting at first, then slowly remembering. She lifted one leg, then the other, testing her balance. She performed a few basic ballet movements, a simple plie, then a slow, deliberate tendu. Her body felt stiff, rusty, but the muscle memory was there, deep within her, waiting. The simple movements brought back a rush of emotions: the pure, unadulterated joy of dancing, the familiar ache of effort, the bittersweet sorrow for the years she had lost. But overwhelmingly, there was a powerful sense of belonging, a feeling that she was finally home in her own skin, doing what she was meant to do. This was her, the real Clara, the one she had suppressed for so long. The spark had ignited into a small, steady flame. The next day, Clara approached her tasks at the Caldwell mansion with a new kind of energy. The lingering humiliation from Eleanor's words was still there, a dull ache, but it was now overshadowed by a fierce, quiet resolve. She was no longer just the maid's daughter, moving through the opulent rooms like a ghost. She was a dancer, with a secret that was slowly beginning to ignite a fire within her. This fire gave her a purpose beyond merely getting through the day. As she went about her duties, dusting the endless shelves of books, polishing the gleaming silverware, and arranging flowers, Clara started to incorporate subtle ballet movements. When she thought no one was watching, she would stretch her legs, pointing her toes, or practice a graceful arm movement as she reached for something. Her body, though still stiff from years of disuse, began to remember the fluid language of dance. She found herself moving with a newfound grace, even in the most mundane tasks. It was a private rebellion, a silent reclaiming of herself in a world that had tried to strip her of her identity. One afternoon, while restocking linens in a seldom-used hallway, Clara caught the eye of Mrs. Gable, the Caldwells' longtime housekeeper. Mrs. Gable was a woman of quiet demeanor and sharp observation, her eyes missing little. She had seen Clara's mother work for years and knew the family's history better than anyone. As Clara stretched her back, subtly arching into a small backbend, Mrs. Gable paused, a faint, knowing smile playing on her lips. She didn't say anything, but her gaze lingered for a moment, a silent acknowledgement that she recognized something special, something hidden. It wasn't overt, but Clara felt a sense of being seen, understood, in a way she hadn't been by anyone in years. It was a small, unexpected moment of connection. A few days later, while exploring the mansion's lesser-used wings, Clara stumbled upon a door tucked away behind a grand staircase. It was slightly ajar, and a sliver of light escaped from within. Pushing it open cautiously, she found herself in a small, rarely used dance studio. It was dusty, clearly not used in ages, but it was there. A long, polished bar running along one wall, a full-length mirror covering another, and a smooth wooden floor. It was simple, nothing like the grand studios she remembered from her past. But to Clara, it was a sanctuary. It was perfect. This forgotten room became her secret space, a place where she could truly be herself, away from prying eyes and the demands of her daily life. Clara began to practice seriously in the hidden studio. Her initial sessions were a mix of frustration and exhilaration. Her muscles ached, her turns were wobbly, and some of the more complex techniques felt foreign to her body. She had to push through the stiffness, the forgotten steps, and the years of emotional baggage that had settled into her limbs. But slowly, painstakingly, her body began to obey. The muscle memory, once dormant, started to reawaken. Each pirouette, each arabesque, each leap brought her closer to the dancer she once was. It was like learning to breathe again, each movement a testament to her enduring passion. Each practice session was more than just physical training. It was an emotional release. The studio became a space where she could shed the weight of her suppressed grief, her longing for her lost dreams. As she moved, the pain of the past intertwined with the joy of the present moment, creating a powerful, cathartic experience. Tears would sometimes stream down her face as she danced, not of sadness, but of a profound sense of liberation. She was reclaiming her story, one step at a time. The movement spoke a language that words could not, expressing the depth of her journey. Her mother, Maria, noticed the change in Clara. The quiet sadness that had shadowed Clara for so long began to lift, replaced by a quiet determination and a hint of the old spark in her eyes. Maria didn't know about the secret studio or the renewed dancing, but she saw the subtle shift in her daughter's demeanor. She saw Clara humming softly as she worked, moving with a lightness that hadn't been there before. It brought a fragile sense of hope to Maria's heart, a silent prayer that whatever was happening, it was good for her daughter. She longed for Clara to find joy again. Meanwhile, Eleanor Caldwell remained oblivious. She continued to treat Clara with the same dismissive air, occasionally giving a sharp command or a condescending glance. Her arrogance, however, only served to further fuel Clara's resolve. Each slight, each thoughtless word hardened Clara's determination to prove her wrong. It wasn't about seeking revenge, but about showing that talent and worth were not defined by social status or wealth. Clara knew she had something Eleanor didn't, something deeper and more authentic. Then an opportunity arose. Mrs. Caldwell, pleased with the success of the charity gala, announced a follow-up event. It was to be a smaller, more intimate evening, a talent showcase to raise additional funds for the same cause. Guests would be encouraged to perform, showcasing various artistic skills. The announcement was made during a staff meeting, and Clara felt a jolt of recognition. This was it. This was her chance. After much internal debate, pacing the confines of her small room, Clara made a bold decision. She would seize this opportunity. She would perform at the event. It wasn't for Eleanor, or for the Caldwells, or for anyone else. It was for herself. It was about honoring the dancer she once was, and the dancer she still was, deep down. It was about reclaiming her identity and proving that her talent, her passion, had never truly died. The thought filled her with a mixture of fear and exhilarating anticipation. She knew this was a risk, but it was a risk she finally felt ready to take. Clara officially decided to participate in the upcoming talent showcase, a secret she guarded carefully from Eleanor. The decision, once made, settled in her heart with a quiet resolve. She knew this wouldn't be easy, but the thought of dancing again in front of an audience, truly dancing, filled her with a powerful sense of purpose. Every spare moment became dedicated to intense ballet training in the hidden studio. She pushed her body beyond what she thought possible, stretching muscles that had been dormant for too long, endlessly repeating sequences until they felt natural again. The floor of the studio became a canvas for her rediscovered art, and the mirror, a silent judge reflecting her progress. She was determined to reach her peak form, not just for the performance but for herself. The observant housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, who had noticed Clara's subtle grace before, became a silent supporter. She didn't pry, didn't ask questions, but her presence was a comforting one. Sometimes, Clara would find a small, thoughtful gesture, a fresh towel left by the bar, a bottle of water, or a quiet nod of encouragement that spoke volumes. Mrs. Gable seemed to understand, without needing words, the quiet struggle and fierce dedication Clara held. It was a small, unexpected alliance that meant more to Clara than she could express. As the showcase drew nearer, Clara faced a significant challenge: finding a suitable costume. Her family had no money for a lavish outfit, and she couldn't ask Maria, knowing the financial strain they were already under. She rummaged through old boxes in her room, hoping to find something, anything, that could be adapted. The thought of performing in her regular clothes felt wrong. The costume was part of the magic, part of the transformation. It forced her to be resourceful, to think creatively, just as she had to be with every aspect of her life. It was during one of these intense practice sessions that Maria eventually discovered Clara in the studio. Maria had come looking for her, worried when Clara hadn't appeared for dinner, and had followed the faint rhythmic sounds. She pushed open the studio door, her eyes widening in shock as she saw Clara mid-leap, her body a picture of grace and strength. Initially, Maria was flooded with a mix of emotions: surprise, worry, and a pang of guilt. She remembered the pain of Clara giving up ballet, the silent suffering. But as she watched her daughter move, she saw the pure joy, the undeniable passion radiating from Clara. The worry slowly faded, replaced by a profound realization of just how much this meant to her daughter. Maria's eyes welled up, but this time it was with pride. She soon realized the depth of Clara's passion and offered her unwavering support. Later that evening, after a long conversation where Clara explained everything, Maria disappeared into her own room. She returned a few minutes later, holding a carefully wrapped bundle. It was an old ballet costume from Clara's childhood, a delicate, pale blue tutu that Maria had lovingly preserved all these years. It was a poignant reminder of Clara's past, of the dreams they both once held. Clara gently unfolded it, the fabric soft and familiar against her fingertips. It was small now, but with some clever alterations, it could be adapted. It was perfect. It wasn't new or fancy, but it carried the weight of her history, of her love for dance, and of her mother's enduring belief in her. In stark contrast, Eleanor Caldwell remained complacent. She was also slated to perform at the showcase, a vocal piece, but her preparation was minimal. She relied on her family's wealth and connections, assuming her participation alone would be enough, that her status would guarantee adoration. She had a vocal coach, expensive lessons, but none of the raw, burning dedication that fueled Clara. She saw the showcase as another opportunity to display her privilege, not her talent. As the day of the showcase loomed closer, Clara experienced a moment of doubt. The fear, so long suppressed, began to creep in. What if she wasn't good enough? What if she failed? The thought of further humiliation, after what Eleanor had already put her through, was almost paralyzing. She stood in front of the mirror, her adapted costume hanging beside her, and saw not the confident dancer she was striving to be, but the vulnerable girl who had given up her dreams. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the delicate fabric, but then she drew strength from the memory of her former teachers, their patient guidance, their unwavering belief in her potential. She remembered the sheer joy of dancing, the feeling of weightlessness, the music flowing through her veins. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, and visualized herself on stage, not performing for others, but for the pure, unadulterated love of the art form itself. This wasn't about proving anything to Eleanor. It was about honoring the dancer within her. The fear began to recede, replaced by a quiet determination. The eve of the performance arrived, bringing with it a mixture of nerves and exhilaration. Clara put the finishing touches on her adapted costume, carefully stitching a loose seam, adding a small piece of ribbon Maria had found. The pale blue fabric, once a symbol of a lost dream, now felt like a second skin, a beacon of hope. She looked at her reflection, a young woman poised on the brink of reclaiming her true self. The stage awaited, and with it, a new chapter. She was ready. The night of the talent showcase finally arrived. The Caldwell mansion, usually so grand and formal, had a different kind of buzz about it. It was less about stiff charity and more about a relaxed display of local talent, though the guest list still included some very important names. The main ballroom had been set up with a small stage at one end, spotlights ready, and rows of elegant chairs facing it. Guests mingled, holding small plates of appetizers and glasses of champagne, their conversations a low hum that filled the room. Clara was backstage, helping with last-minute adjustments, her heart thumping a little faster than usual. She watched as other performers, nervous and excited, went on and off the stage. Eventually, it was Eleanor's turn. Mrs. Caldwell, beaming with pride, introduced her daughter, highlighting her exceptional vocal talents. Eleanor, dressed in a shimmering evening gown, stepped onto the stage with a confident smile. She sang a popular ballad, her voice clear and well-trained. Technically, it was a good performance. She hit all the notes, her pitch was accurate, and she projected well. But it lacked something. There was no real feeling, no raw emotion that could truly connect with the audience. It was polished, yes, but also a little cold, like a perfectly sculpted ice statue. When she finished, the applause was polite and generous, but it didn't have the spontaneous warmth that comes from a truly moving performance. Eleanor bowed gracefully, accepted the compliments, and left the stage, satisfied with her effort. She glanced backstage, catching Clara's eye for a brief moment, a flicker of smugness in her expression, before disappearing into the crowd. Then it was Clara's turn. The announcer, a local socialite, read her name. Clara felt a sudden rush of adrenaline, a mix of fear and excitement. A hush fell over the room as she stepped onto the makeshift stage. She wore her simple, yet elegant, adapted costume, the pale blue tutu, now perfectly fitted, a testament to her mother's love and her own ingenuity. The fabric shimmered softly under the lights, a quiet contrast to Eleanor's sparkling gown. Her hair was pulled back neatly, her posture erect, exuding a quiet confidence that was entirely her own. She took a deep breath, looking out at the sea of faces, and found her mother's anxious but proud gaze in the front row. The music for Clara's ballet piece began. It was a poignant and powerful composition, a classical piece that Clara had loved since childhood. The first notes, slow and melancholic, filled the room, setting a tone of deep emotion and storytelling. Clara closed her eyes for a split second, letting the music wash over her, grounding her. Then she opened them and began to move. She danced with raw emotion, grace, and unparalleled technical skill. Every movement, every turn, every leap was infused with meaning. Her body, once stiff and hesitant, now flowed with a liquid beauty that seemed effortless. She wasn't just performing steps, she was telling a story of lost dreams, of the pain of letting go, of the quiet perseverance that had brought her back to this moment. Her dance spoke of the years of practice, the sacrifices, the joy she found in movement, and the quiet determination to reclaim her identity. She moved across the stage, a whirlwind of precise yet ethereal motion, her expression conveying a depth of feeling that Eleanor's performance had completely lacked. The simple costume, far from hindering her, only highlighted the purity of her art. It was a dance that transcended the opulent setting, touching something universal in the hearts of the audience. The audience was completely captivated. The low hum of conversation faded into complete silence, replaced by the soft rustle of clothing and the occasional sharp intake of breath. Whispers of awe and admiration began to spread through the room, quiet at first, then growing louder. "Who is she? She's incredible! Where did she come from?" Many recognized a talent far beyond what they expected from a casual talent showcase, especially from someone they assumed was just another member of the household staff. Their eyes were glued to Clara, unable to look away from the sheer artistry unfolding before them. Eleanor watched from the back of the room, her initial smirk slowly fading into disbelief. Her eyes, which had been dismissive just moments before, widened in shock. The easy confidence she usually carried crumbled, replaced by a dawning realization of Clara's incredible talent. She saw the precision, the emotion, the sheer power in Clara's movements, and understood, with a sickening lurch, that this was what true talent looked like. Her face registered a mixture of envy, humiliation, and a grudging respect she never thought she'd feel. The girl she had mocked, the maid's daughter, was performing on a level she could only dream of. Maria, Clara's mother, watched from the front row, tears streaming down her face. They weren't tears of sadness, but of overwhelming pride. She saw Clara not just dancing, but soaring, finally shining after so many years of suppressed dreams and hard work. All the sacrifices, all the burdens, all the quiet struggles seemed to melt away in that moment. Her daughter was truly free, truly herself, on that stage. As Clara finished her performance, holding a final breathtaking pose, the room erupted. It wasn't polite applause. It was a thunderous roar, a spontaneous outburst of appreciation. Guests jumped to their feet, clapped with fervor, and cheered. The entire room rose in a wave, culminating in a passionate, spontaneous standing ovation that lasted for what felt like an eternity. Clara stood there, breathing heavily, her chest heaving, the sound of the applause washing over her. She bowed, a deep, heartfelt bow, her heart swelling with a profound sense of accomplishment and vindication. The sting of Eleanor's cruel words, "You don't even know how to dance," had been completely obliterated, replaced by the deafening, joyous roar of applause. It was more than just validation. It was a reclaiming of her past, a powerful declaration of her identity. The stage lights felt warm on her face, the sound of the audience a symphony of triumph. She had danced not just for herself, but for every lost dream, every quiet struggle, and for the unwavering love of her mother. This was her moment. Guests immediately flocked to Clara the moment the applause began to die down, their faces alight with genuine admiration and curiosity. They surrounded her, a sea of elegant dresses and tailored suits, all eager to praise her extraordinary talent and inquire about her background. "Who are you? That was breathtaking. Where do you train?" The questions came in a rush, a clear contrast to the indifference she had faced just hours before. Clara, still breathless from her performance, managed a shy smile, feeling a warmth she hadn't experienced in years. She saw faces she recognized from the gala, influential people who had previously looked right through her, now looking at her with respect and genuine interest. It was a dizzying, wonderful feeling. Eleanor, humbled and visibly embarrassed, eventually made her way through the throng. Her usual haughty demeanor was gone, replaced by a sheepish uncertainty. She approached Clara, her eyes downcast, a stark shift from the confident girl who had mocked her. "Clara," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, I'm so sorry about what I said and how I acted." It was a genuine, albeit reluctant, apology, the words seemingly difficult for her to form. The public display of Clara's talent had completely stripped away Eleanor's facade of superiority. Clara simply nodded, a quiet understanding passing between them. The apology wasn't really necessary. The performance had already spoken volumes. Mrs. Caldwell, looking genuinely touched, stepped forward next. Her eyes were moist, and she took Clara's hands in hers. "Clara, that was simply magnificent," she said, her voice filled with a warmth Clara had never heard from her before. "I had no idea. We had no idea." She paused, collecting her thoughts. "I want to help you, truly. Whatever you need to pursue this, your ballet career, lessons, connections, anything. Let us help you." Mrs. Caldwell's offer was sincere, a clear recognition of the injustice Clara had faced and a desire to make amends. It felt like a turning point, a bridge being built where once there had only been an impassable chasm. Clara turned to her mother, Maria, who was standing a little distance away, still wiping tears from her eyes. Their eyes met, and a silent conversation passed between them. Clara walked over and embraced her mother tightly, a heartfelt moment that spoke volumes. "Thank you, Mama," Clara whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "For everything, for your sacrifices, for believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." Maria held her daughter, stroking her hair, the years of worry and guilt finally lifting from her shoulders. It was a moment of profound reconciliation, acknowledging Maria's endless sacrifices and Clara's deep gratitude for her unwavering support. Then, a tall, distinguished woman with sharp, intelligent eyes stepped forward. She introduced herself as Madame Dubois, director of a prestigious ballet academy known for nurturing exceptional talent. "Miss Clara," Madame Dubois began, her voice firm but kind, "your performance tonight was truly remarkable. I haven't seen such raw talent and emotional depth in years. I would be honored to offer you a full scholarship to our academy. We believe you have the potential to achieve greatness." The words hung in the air. A dream Clara had long buried, suddenly resurrected and presented to her on a silver platter. It was the kind of opportunity aspiring dancers only dreamed of. An almost unbelievable turn of events. Clara found herself facing a monumental choice. The scholarship meant finally pursuing her dreams, the ones she had put aside for so long. But it also meant leaving her familiar life, her mother, and the only world she had ever known. It was a difficult decision, fraught with both excitement and a touch of fear. She looked at her mother, who gave her a reassuring nod, her eyes full of encouragement. She looked at Mrs. Caldwell, who smiled kindly, signaling her support. The Caldwells, particularly Mrs. Caldwell, now expressed genuine remorse for their past ignorance and pledged to support Clara's journey in any way they could. They had learned a valuable lesson that evening. Embracing the future, Clara accepted the scholarship. It wasn't just an opportunity for herself. It was a testament to her mother's perseverance, her quiet strength, and the sacrifices made for her daughter's future. It was a chance to prove that true talent and spirit could overcome any obstacle, any social barrier. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she felt a surging sense of purpose and excitement. A few weeks later, Clara prepared to leave. It was a farewell, but not a goodbye. She hugged her mother tightly, promising to call every day. She thanked the Caldwells for their unexpected generosity and support. A family who had started as symbols of her oppression and had become unlikely benefactors. Eleanor, too, was there, a genuine smile on her face as she wished Clara good luck. The animosity between them had completely dissolved, replaced by a mutual respect. Clara embarked on her new path, a former prodigy reborn. With her old ballet shoes carefully packed and her mother's love as her compass, she stepped onto a train, ready to embrace a future where her talent could finally flourish. The world was waiting for her, a world where artistry truly transcended social status, proving that the maid's daughter, the girl who didn't know how to dance, was destined for greatness.